Hello everyone, today is December 20th, 2019. My name is Hoshino. Next year is going to be very exciting as we enter the age of Aquarius. We're going to have a mass meditation on the age of Aquarius activation in January with the aim to bring the financial reset to the reality. And I'm very happy to have two very special guests, Cobra and Benjamin Fulford, to have an interview with me about this meditation and the current situation of the financial system. So welcome, Cobra.
Thank you for your invitation.
And welcome, Ben.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
We have received many questions from our readers, and so without further ado, let's start talking about the current situation of the financial system. So, Ben, based on your observation, how would you describe the current situation of the real economy? How bad this is?
Well, that's a kind of a loaded question. It depends where you're talking about, but essentially what's happened is that the United States has deindustrialized, and now they're having trouble paying for their imports. But they still control the dollar printing press and the reserve currency. What they're doing is they're creating trillions of dollars and pumping it into the stock market, which they control. So they're using the stock market to launder their funny money and try to keep their system afloat, but they don't have the physical production to back up their funny money. That's the situation. So it's just a matter of time before the whole system collapses, and that's why they're desperately trying to get China to buy more stuff. That's why you have Trump saying that China's going to buy $200 billion of stuff every year from them, because if they don't get that, they're doomed. But I've been arguing that we need to bankrupt them because they've been at war for most of the past 240 years, and they have a dysfunctional society and a dysfunctional system that needs to be rebooted, and the American people need to be liberated.
Right. Thank you for that. And Cobra, do you have anything to add on this?
Yes, basically what is happening is that this debt-based financial system was ongoing for quite some time, and it was quite successful for the cabal because it was their way of controlling the surface population. But what is happening now is that there are more and more structural inconsistencies in that system, and more people are aware of them. And this awareness is what is actually starting to accelerate the collapse of the old system. And this is what we are experiencing right now. It is not yet the common knowledge. An average person in the United States still thinks that the stock market is doing great, everything is just perfect, and they are not really aware of what is happening at the core of the system. And this is what we will be talking about a little bit today.
Thank you. So, Ben, based on your experience as a journalist in the financial industry, do you have any suggestions on finding indices of the real economic situation instead of looking at indices such as Dow Jones Index or being brainwashed by the mainstream media?
Well, the things you need to look at are actual industrial production. You need to look at goods and services, imports and exports, and trade balances. In other words, any index that's based on stuff that actually exists, as opposed to, virtual things such as derivatives, which are, maybe 1,000 times more in number than the actual underlying real thing that it's supposed to be based on. So you look at the Baltic Dry Index, which to look at what's happening with ships. You look at what's happening to physical trade, and then you look at for how well the people are doing. You need to look at something called median GMP or per capita, which means it's the level where half the people are above and half the people are below. So, for example, in Canada, it's about $80,000. In the U.S., it's more like 15,000. But if you look at per capita GDP, which they prefer, it looks like the Americans are richer. So, you have to, at the end of the day, see how you yourself and your family are doing compared to before, and that's the best way to look at it.
All right. Krober, do you agree with that, or do you have anything to add?
Yes, actually, this is the core of the situation. The current financial system is not based on real trade. It's not actually a capitalist system. It is based on the theoretical value which is created with sophisticated computer programs, all these derivatives, all the stock market, all even the treasuries, all those financial instruments are just an idea that exists inside of a computer. And the state of economy does not reflect anymore the real production. And this is the core of the issue. What will happen in the coming collapse is that the planetary financial system will have to revert back to the real basics in a new way. It will have to revert to real production, real productivity, real creativity of people, and not this funny money situation which existed for the last 2 centuries and after World War II especially. This is going to change.
Yeah, I would say, to be honest, I think the real problem started in 1971, or even before that. But 1971 is when they took it off the gold. They took the dollar off the gold standard. And if you look at that, that's when Americans started getting poorer. 99% of Americans started getting poorer from that time on. Japan, they started getting poorer after 1985 when the Americans forced them to dismantle their system. But countries that still have a reality-based system, like China, are actually doing quite well.
Okay, yeah, thanks for the answers. And Ben, Krober has mentioned Yamashita Gold several times in his blog. Do you know the story as well and the future purpose of this legendary gold?
Okay, the Yamashita Gold is long gone. Okay, the actual Yamashita Gold. A guy called Willoughby. In fact, Mr. Krober, you should read a book called Gold Warriors. It'll tell you the story. But
yes, I know about that book. Yeah.
The actual Yamashita Gold was spent and used to set up Citibank, Black Eagle Trust, a bunch of other stuff, and it's long gone. But I keep hearing stories about legendary caves full of gold in Indonesia, in China, and Korea, all over Asia. But I've yet to see proof of it. And I've been asking for 10 years. I've been flying to these places, talking to people, saying, just take a newspaper and a camera and take a picture of this newspaper in front of the gold to show me it's there. And they can't do that. So, they keep repeating it's there, but I haven't seen it. I haven't seen the proof. But if you do look at the history books, it does show that since Roman era, the Roman times, the West has been sending gold and silver to Asia, and Asia has been sending spices and ceramics and silk. So in theory, it's there, but I haven't seen the proof yet, except for what you can see in public. And there you can see that China is adding to its official gold reserves at a very high pace, and so is Russia. Whereas the U.S. is being caught lying about their gold reserves and can't prove they have them.
Yeah, basically what was happening with the Yamashita gold, that this is the gold which was looted from all Asia, from China, from the Philippines, from Malaysia, from Indonesia. It was taken to the Philippines and then to the United States. It was put into the trading programs which have financed the underground bases, and those underground military bases were preparing the world for the Draco invasion, which happened in '96. And yes, this gold is long gone. And also the gold from Fort Knox is long gone, and the Rothschild gold is gone. Actually, the ones that are really having the gold now is China, and they're preparing for something with that gold.
Now, I've heard there's still gold in the mountains behind the BIS, but again, I contacted them with proof that I had being authorized by the owners of the gold to get it back, and of course they couldn't do it, or they refused to do it. So I don't know about Draco invasions or anything like that, but I do know as an on-the-ground surface journalist that the problem can be forensically traced to the BIS in Switzerland, to the Federal Reserve Board in Washington, D.C. and New York, and to a lesser extent to the European Central Bank and the Bank of Japan. These people are these institutions are not owned by any government on earth. I can prove that too. They're not owned by the United States government. They're not owned by the government of Japan. The Europeans don't own the European Central Bank. and the Swiss government has no authority over the BIS. So as a surface person, based on what I can see in this world, I say the military need to attack the BIS. They need to attack the Federal Reserve Board, not attack, but occupy them physically. Send troops in and take over the BIS, the European Central Bank, the Federal Reserve Board, and the Bank of Japan. That is essential if we want to change this nightmare we're going through.
If you want to do that, you will need to know that the black nobility families who own those places have their own private armies, they have own mercenaries, and it's not an easy thing to do.
I know, but I've been dealing with them. What I've tried to do is convince a lot of them that, you know, if you keep the surface population poor, you're killing the goose that lays the golden egg, and a lot of them have agreed with me. And I think we're almost at a turning point where we're saying, you know, we're not out to get the bad guys. We're just out to save the planet. And so please, you know, help us or step aside. But if they don't step aside, we have no choice. We're going to have to move them aside.
Yes, I agree. And recently there's a news coming up that the US official co-reserve auditor has been caught lying as well. So that may become a maybe a tipping point that the gold story will become more public, let's say.
The other thing to watch out for is that January 31st is the deadline for the U.S. government, the next payments deadline. And right now, it doesn't look like they have the money, but they'll try this and they'll try that. I'm not saying they're not going to be able to find it, but right now we're trying our hardest to make sure they don't get the money and that we can collapse that fake government on January 31st.
The thing with this, it's an ongoing story. It's actually the debt ceiling, it gets raised and raised and it gets restructured. And this is the core issue of the debt-based economy. You can always restructure the debt. You can always do some funny cooking of the books. You can do behind the closed doors deals, and things just get extended to the next period.
Yeah, but they won't be able to pay for their oil. They won't be able to pay for the imports. And if we can do that, if we can cut them off, and they've been trying very hard. It's clear that our strategy is working because you have Trump saying he wants to steal Mexican oil. They tried and failed to steal Venezuela's oil. They were threatening to take over Greenland. They're not getting a peace deal with North Korea because North Korea won't give them all their gold. They're desperate and they're cornered and they're dangerous, but I can see that they really are starting to run out of options.
Yes, I agree. And this is exactly what is happening in January. I mean, there is a very strong astrological configuration, and astrology is not just superstition. It's based on real science. It's based on resonance, which is being created with plasma fields throughout the solar system, and this affects everybody. Actually, there was a study done by Federal Reserve on the influence of the solar cycles on the real economy, and the same thing is happening with the planets. The planetary configurations do have a real effect on the world economy, and what is coming in January is huge.
Well, what I do know is this: when I used to cover the futures markets, the traders had moon signs on their charts, and I said, "What are these?" And they say, "Well, some people believe that a full moon affects how people trade, and because some people believe it, I do it too. And the effect is it does affect the trade, whether or not it's actually anything to do with the moon or psychology. In the same way, even if you don't believe or understand this planetary stuff, if we all agree that something's going to happen on a certain date, we can make it happen. So either way, whether or not you believe in astrology, if we choose to do this, we can make it happen. So you don't have to understand or believe this stuff to make it happen. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Exactly. So this is why we're having this meditation on January 11th and 12th to put a strong signal, a coherent, conscious signal in the field around the planet. And this will, of course, if you reach a critical mass, this will affect the financial situation, the financial system. And it's time to burst the bubble. And this is the moment when we can burst the bubble. And then, of course, people are saying we need a hard crash system. No, we need to guide the system in a controlled crash to reset into a new one. People still need food on their table. People still need to drive their cars. And this transition needs to be done in a way that will be without any drastic chaos.
Well, what I'm trying to do is I've tried to convince the Pentagon, the British Commonwealth, the P2 Freemasons who control the Catholic world, and all these people, and the Chinese. I think we're trying to get an agreement to have an organized restructuring of the U.S. economy and a swords to plowshares transformation of the military-industrial complex. And you can see that the Americans are starting to release some of their secret technology as their way for paying for keeping in business. So we are working on that. I'm trying to get a meeting with very senior people in January, and we're pushing, and everyone seems to agree, but the blockage still seems to be right now the people behind Trump and the people at the BIS in Switzerland. They seem to be the main obstacle right now, as far as I can tell, with the here now reality thing.
Yeah, the thing is, the BIS is the central bank of the central banks, and is being controlled by a black nobility family called Torlonia family, and they, of course, they will not want to give out their control. And after a certain amount of exposure, a certain amount of awareness, they will have to. And the main thing that will need to be exposed is the child abuse networks. This is also going to be huge next year.
Yeah, I studied the FBI statistics, and 40,000 children disappear every year in the United States. That's way more than any other country, and they're doing everything they can. They're literally fighting for their lives to make sure people don't find out what they've been doing. But yes, that would be the key that would get all the men with guns to just go and drag these people out of their houses and force them out of power, if that's what it comes to. I wish it doesn't come to that, but it is going to come to that if they don't step aside quickly.
I think this is the way it's going to happen, because when people realize what was going on, they will be very, very, very angry.
Yeah, and we have the names, we know the places, and we know who their leaders are, and a lot of them have already been killed or arrested. But the really bizarre thing that's going on is that I see more and more computer graphics being used to hide who's really behind that. So, it's hard to tell. They've got all these fake politicians who exist only on world media screens, camouflaging these people. We need to expose that, and that means we need to shut down the big media corporations and stop them from putting out computer graphics and fooling everybody into thinking there's people who still exist who don't exist anymore. Especially, for example, George Soros, I've proven very thoroughly. Others, I can't be sure. I get evidence, and then I see every day on TV these people who I was told were arrested, but I can't confirm anybody who's in Washington who could see them with their own eyes, So that's a tricky thing. They've got all these, they're literally using computer graphics to fool us.
Yes, basically, mainstream media is just fake news. You cannot find truth there. You need to find other sources to get the truth.
Which is why I wonder why the military don't occupy the headquarters of these big media companies.
Yeah, everything at the right time.
Yeah. Okay, anything else you want to talk about, Mr. Cobra?
Well, it would be good that as many people as possible join this meditation. If I would just explain briefly what this meditation does. Meditation, if it is done in the same moment with a large mass of people, changes mass consciousness. And everything that happens on the planet is an effect of mass consciousness. Basically, everything that's happening today is a sum of vectors of decisions of everybody on the planet, 7.7 billion people making daily decisions. And if we put a coherent signal for one moment in that whole lump of free will vectors, we can change the outcome. And this is what we're doing. So I would ask everybody who has large audiences to support us with this and to get the critical mass. And I think Hoshino has many more questions for both of us.
Well, one last question for now, and then we can reschedule again in a week or two, if that's okay.
Yeah. So, Ben, is it true that the White Dragon Society holds about 100 trillion worth of global settlement funds?
No. What the White Dragon Society is doing is trying to convince the people who actually do control the real world financial system to support a massive campaign to end poverty and stop environmental destruction. $100 million in the fiat system is just numbers in a computer. What is required is a collective decision to change how we run the planet. And if we can do that, and I think we're very close, then the equivalent of $100 trillion is there. But at the end of the day, it has to do with humans making decisions, especially people in a leadership position in the financial industry, to say, okay, let's finance a massive campaign to end poverty, stop environmental destruction, and send humanity out into the universe peacefully. And I think that we're at a critical mass among very senior people as well as people on the ground. So maybe together with this meditation, we can make it happen. All right. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. Thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for listening, and see you next time.
Thank you to everyone for listening to this interview. Victory of the Light.